This, while you're talking, leads me to wonder if people who are stuck ever encounter others while they're stuck and continue thinking that they're alive because they still have interactions, or are they always just separate and stuck in that way? Does that make sense?
I think what you're asking is, do some people who are dire and stuck, are they in contact with physically living humans sometimes? Is that what you're asking?
Or maybe others who are in a state somewhat similar to where they are?
Okay.
Well, be able to have contact, and so that precipitates them continuing to think they're alive because of that.
In my experience, there are several ways this plays out. For someone who is stuck, according to Monroe's map, a person who is stuck in this place he called Focus 23 was stuck by virtue of the fact that they were completely isolated and alone and had no contact with anyone outside of themselves. But I know from further exploration that helpers, you might call them guides, you might call them angels, whatever you call them, I call them helpers. Helpers are constantly trying to enter into these places where a person is stuck alone and trying to get their attention and trying to retrieve them. But it appears that either they're not aware of the helper, the person who's stuck is just not aware of the helper, and I'm not sure exactly how that works. I think it's something like most of us physically living people are not aware of ghosts because ghosts live in a little different environment. I think for people who have died and are stuck, helpers come from a little different environment, and it's kind of like that sometimes those people can't perceive the helper. Anyway, one of the reasons seems to be that they can't perceive the helper who comes to try to help them move out, because helpers, I think, oftentimes are able to retrieve people who are stuck, whether it's by themselves or in a belief system territory. One of the other ways they can remain stuck that I have found and others have found is that a person who has died may believe that this helper who's come in is just part of some dream they're having, some fantasy they're having. I think there's an example in one of my books about a man who entered a hospital with some disease in the process of killing him. He was sure the doctors are going to find a cure and to be going home healthy. But eventually, he realized he was not going to survive this trip to the hospital. And so he changed his frame of mind from anticipating going home to a frame of mind in which he was just waiting to die. Unfortunately, he was asleep when he died. And when he woke up, to his perception, he was still in his hospital room, the room he'd always been in. And to his perception, there were still some people moving around. He didn't seem to be able to communicate with them at all, or maybe he didn't see them. I don't know. But the fact that he was holding himself in the frame of mind of waiting to die meant that within his own framework, he could not be dead because he was waiting to be dead, if that makes any sense to you. And so his retrieval amounted to bringing his attention to the fact that his own mother was there sitting at his bedside. And she was trying to communicate with him. She was the helper who came to try to retrieve him. And once that connection was made, he was able to move along. So I think lots of times helpers are able to retrieve them. Sometimes for some reasons that, like in cases where the person is unable to be aware of the helper, they need physically living human intervention. That means you need a retriever, someone like you who's learned to do retrievals, to make contact with them, and then at least bring their attention to the helper who is there. So once that connection is made, the retrieval will happen. I'm not sure I answered your question, though.
Not exactly. That's been very helpful. The question is, I don't think Monroe ever encountered this, and perhaps it doesn't exist, but someone who somehow has been able to continue as if they were alive, interacting with others in a way that continues them to think that they're alive, experience a life that appears to continue on, although they may not actually physically be alive.
You mean maybe like several people died at the same time, like in an accident?
Like the Oklahoma City thing, if all the people died together,
Possibly.
maybe they can interact with each other.
That would be an example.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the people who are in the belief system territories, by Monroe's definition, there are areas of consciousness in which a belief held by a large group creates a reality. And so, for example, I was raised as a Lutheran, and I know that there are a lot of people who are Lutherans who were taught to believe in a particular heaven, that there would be particular things there, that you would do certain activities there, the Lutheran heaven gig. The fact that so many people believe that actually creates that reality, creates that place that is like that. And Lutherans who strongly believe they're going to that heaven when they die, if they don't get intercepted and brought to a better place, may go to that heaven, in which case they will interact with all the other Lutherans who are in that Lutheran heaven as if they were alive but now living in heaven. Unfortunately, Lutherans also believe in hell. And the group held belief in Lutheran hell creates, in my view, creates Lutheran hell, and bad Lutherans who believe they should go to hell end up going there for no other reason than their own church sends them there. Now, you won't find any Lutherans in Catholic heaven or Catholics in Muslim heaven, because each religion has its own beliefs. So in that way, there is a place where I could say, yeah, there are people there who exist in a way that they believe they're alive, but now they're living in heaven. Or in the place that Monroe described as Focus 27, an area of consciousness where people are, the kind of people he found there are people who don't force their beliefs on anybody else. There are no belief requirements involved, and no one forces their will on some other person. There are no rules that you must obey. People there live in free and open association with everyone else who's there, along with all the things that are created there and provided there for their own learning or entertainment or whatever, and they live their lives non-visibly in a way that they would say they're alive. The closest thing to people thinking they're still physically alive and living that way are the ones we call ghosts. Because there are some people who are so close to physical reality consciousness in the area of afterlife consciousness they exist in. They are so close that sometimes by a sensitive person, they can be perceived here. Not often, sometimes. Those people can see and hear you. There could be some of them in the room with you right now listening to what we're saying. And those people may believe that they're still alive, and just for some reason, when they try to talk to you, you just ignore them.
Can I ask a question there?
Sure.
Do you mind? I have a friend who's a fellow author and also wrote a book about his experiences. He's a gentleman that lives here in Fort Collins, and he has a ghost living in his house. I have actually met her, and wondered, she actually has followed the family from one home to another. They moved, and she actually followed them. And he found out all about her, who she is, what year she died, and all. And I'm just wondering, you know, is it something that someone should do to help her move on, or is you know, what is her reason for being there? She doesn't try to hurt anybody, but it's a really interesting situation. I'd like to have him come talk to you all at some point too about his
Yeah, I've worked with a number of ghost situations, and I would say in most cases, it's probably best that you at least help make them aware of the fact that they can go to a better place,
Okay.
and that they be made aware of the fact that there is someone there who would like to talk to them and explain more about this to them. Because some people who are ghosts are stuck there, well, they're just almost as many different reasons as there are people. But some of the typical ones. Well, wait, do you know why she's still there?
Well, he thinks the reason she's there is because when she died, she left a 2-year-old daughter behind.
Yeah,
And
that's...
he has several young girls, and he thinks that she is attached to the girls, and that's what he thinks anyway.
Yeah, well, that is a fairly common, a common reason for ghosts to be stuck. A woman who has children, she gets sick, and she's, you know, the oldest one of 3 kids is 3 years old. That mom doesn't want to leave because she's the mom.
Right.
You know, she needs to look after her children in whatever way she can, and so she will focus on staying there to do that. Sometimes she'll focus on staying there to do that long before her children are grown, or long after her children are completely grown and have died.
Right. Yeah.
She's still there for those children. And in a case like that, I would definitely say it's a good idea to make contact with them and try to help this woman understand, or any ghost, to understand that there is a better place they can be, and that there's someone here who would like to explain more about that to you, so you can take a tour if you like, see some of these other places that you might go and that you might live. And then there are some other cases. There was one in Colorado Springs years ago. I think I wrote about it in one of my books. There was a family who moved into a house, and not long after that, the 2 children, a young boy and young girl, started talking about this man in the house. And they didn't like this man. And the parents got as much information as they could, and from all the information they got from the kids and from people who lived around the neighborhood, it was the guy who used to live in the house who had died. He was a ghost in the house, and he was in contact with kids. Well, the parents were really interested in trying to prove that it was that guy. And so through a bookstore, they contacted me, the Knick Knack Nook bookstore, my favorite bookstore in Denver.
Yes, I remember that.
Anyway, they contacted me, and it's the first time I checked on this old guy. It just seemed like an old guy who was an alcoholic and spent most of his time nearly passed out, and I just sort of left him there. The next time I checked on him, I realized he was a pedophile. He wasn't just in contact with the kids, he was doing stuff with the kids that's not to be done. It was at that point that there are other ways to retrieve people. The way that I teach is a very simple, straightforward way. But then there are guys like this that I'm not going to give him a choice. I just came into the scene, said, "Hi, we're leaving." I grabbed him by the arm and we're gone. And I brought him into a place where there were people who could provide him with whatever help he needed. I don't recommend you do that kind of retrieval until you've had experience with a couple of normal ones. But yeah, there are some who still interact here. And with the ghost in the house, yeah, I would say at least make contact, at least let her know. You know, years ago there was a group from TMI used to come out to it was a hotel up in the mountains with ghosts.
Stanley?
Could be.
Stanley Hotel in Estes Park?
Yeah, I think so. But there were groups who used to go up there to see the ghosts. And I mean, it pissed me off that no one did anything to try to retrieve these ghosts. There's a town here in Florida called something like Castaneda. Anyway, it's a town that's known with hotels filled with ghosts. And it's a town where psychics come and do readings, and you can stay in the hotels with the ghosts. And every psychic, every person who comes there to work signs a legal document that says you won't fool around with the ghosts who are living in the hotel. You won't make them leave, because that's part of our business. Talk about slavery, right? Oh well. Now, who would have believed you'd be hearing about slave ghosts?